We live? Okay. Welcome back to Goshen again. More for another episode of Mysterious Stuff. We still reading the analysis and assessment of the gateway process by the Department of the Army. You know, shout out to the research and development team. Um, we back to get into some more interesting stuff. Um, we gonna last we left off. Things about to get confusing. I'm sorry, y'all. I read ahead. I read ahead. Um, Last we talked about self cognition and evaluation. I think that's pretty. Those. I mean, if I understood, those were saying that we as humans we can understand and um, we can understand and evaluate ourselves and stuff like that. Um, so the thought process against nervous objective. Right, and they were saying that because the real difference between us and animals, huh? Human consciousness can do this because it has the capacity to duplicate aspects of its own hologram, project them out, receive that projection, put it through comparison with the memory aspect where its evaluation standards of measure are stored of its own hologram and measure of sense that since the differences using three-dimensional geometry than binary. Go, no, go, pulse to yield verbal cognition about the self. There's also lesson. That's why we did compute. We made computers and stuff like that. That's also another pretty much mimicking, not trying to mimic ourselves. It didn't go into like that, but it did touch on um, computers being one of the examples of this cognition, or you know, being able to, what's it called? See ourselves. What was the word again? We can evaluate stuff. But as just a brief, we're gonna go on. But as regardless, it's cool stuff. Cool stuff. So we're gonna go ahead and finish. Not finish, but we're gonna go ahead and talk about the 18 now, the space-time dimension, and it starts. Up to this point, our discussion of the gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow. This is why you shouldn't talk, just read. About to get real interesting, ladies and gentlemen. At this point on, now the fun begins. Gateway involves more than just perception of those aspects of the universal hologram which can be accessed in the dimension of time-space as we know. Sorry, one sec. Sorry. To explain how and why human consciousness can be brought to transcend the limitations of time-space is the next task which must be addressed. To do this, we must first appreciate what time and space are in order to understand how the dimension that they constitute can be transcended. Physicists define time as a measurement of energy or force in motion. In other words, it is a measurement of change. However, in order for energy to be in motion, it must first be limited in some way within the confines of some sort of vibratory pattern so that its confinement gives it the capacity for some sort of it gives a capacity for being contained in a specific location which is distinguishable from other locations, space. Energy which is not confined is force without limit, without dimension, without the limits of form. It is infinity. Cannot move. It is infinity. Cannot move because there is nothing beyond infinity. It is therefore outside of the dimension of time. It is nothing. It is also beyond space because the concept implies that a specific energy form is limited to a specific location. It is absent from other locations. But if the energy is in a state of infinity, there are no boundaries, no here to differentiate from there, no sense of area. Energy in infinity means energy uniformly extended without limit. It has no beginning, no end, no location. It is a conscious force, the fundamental primal power of existence without form, the state of infinite being. Energy in infinity is said to be completely at rest and therefore cannot generate holograms so long as it remains utterly inactive. It contains its inherent capacity for consciousness in that it can receive and passively perceive holograms generated by energy and motion out in the various dimensions which make up the created universe, but it cannot be perceived by consciousness operating in the active universe. Sorry about that scrolling for y'all who couldn't keep up. I'm gonna scroll up just in case you want to read that. I know I did that kind of fast. I'm start over again. You know, have to hop to 19. Realize I messed that up. Um, we're gonna start right here with energy. Energy in infinity is said to be completely at rest and therefore cannot generate holograms so long as it remains utterly inactive. It retains its inherent capacity for consciousness in that it can receive and passively perceive holograms generated by energy and motion out in the various dimensions which make up the created universe, but it cannot be perceived by consciousness operating in an active universe. Energy in this state of inactive infinity is termed by physicists as energy in its absolute state, or simple absolute. Between the absolute and the material universe in which we experience our physical existence are various intervening dimensions. Oh, is that intervening? Yeah, I think that's intervening. Intervening dimensions to which human consciousness and altered states of being can gain access. Theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand the horizons of its perceptual capability until it reaches the dimension of the absolute, at which point perception stops because the absolute generates no holograms or of or about itself. I'm still here. Confident I understood only about like 10% of that. But it sounds cool. Oh, yeah, cool. This would be just kind of looking pretty long. If anybody would try to explain some shit like this, bro, like, well, I think this might be no, yeah, this might be outside, like Tyson the garage, but like imagine, no, I would need somebody. I would need somebody like him to break this down. I'm vaguely get it. It's like some Speed Force type shit. Speed Force type crime. Or with how your boy was doing it in Fire Force. You know, very vaguely understood that. But that's cool. 19. We're gonna start how fast we are. Ooh, Intervening dimensions. Hey, hey. Oh, right. I didn't get that far yet. Man, I'm sorry, y'all. I read ahead, but it was funny. Um, I'm gonna start at 19. Make sure you're intellectually capable of communicating. That's a weird one to hear. Um, hey, time mark this when we go to the end. I'm sorry, but when we get to the end of this entire thing, there are warnings, right? There, tips on how to navigate. And one of them speaks about being intellectually, I think, capable or sound or something along those lines, but communicate with other, let's say, entities if you can access the gateway. Pretty funny. That was a pretty funny warning. You might get pulled up on. Hey, you new here. All right, my bad. Tangent over. 19. Intervening dimensions. Since the absolute is conscious energy and infinity, i.e., without boundaries, is the in infinity. I um uh, it occupies every dimension to include the time space dimension in which we have our physical existence, but we cannot perceive it. It overlays everything as do many of the intervening gradients or dimensions through which the energies of the universe pass on their way to and from their home in the state of infinity, the absolute. To enter these intervening dimensions, human consciousness must focus with such intense coherence that the frequency of the energy pattern it comprises that consciousness, i.e., the brainwave output, can accelerate to a point where the resulting frequency pattern, if displayed on an oscilloscope, confident I pronounced that wrong, would look virtually like a solid line. Achievement of this state of altered consciousness sets the stage for perception of non-time space dimensions because of the operation of a principle in physics known as Planck's distance. Bro, this definitely sounds like the shit in Fire Force. It's like when they talk about. It's like when they talk about. I ain't gonna say pay attention, but be mindful of how you're using power. And not just in Fire Force, like when they be trying to when they be saying don't go fully into the element like a fire or something like that. You might get lost in the fire. You might get lost into the electricity. You may never be able to come back once you become full electricity and then rematerialize. This what this shit sounds like, bro. The absolute is you gotta watch it because if you enter the absolute, you may not come back to the physical world. That's what that sounds like. That's what it sounds like when a lot of these powers be introduced, especially in Fire Force. I'm talking about the lines. And again, it's probably Speed Force too. Probably the Speed Force. This just sounds like the Speed Force. And also this, this was solved all like understanding these principles, like some of this shit would even if this isn't true, this should have solved a lot of issues in Marvel and DC when it comes to reaching these higher dimensions and shit like that, bro. All this shit makes so much sense. Like if you explain this the like celestial super duper powered motherfuckers, the ancient motherfuckers to shit like this, everything else makes so much sense. Did these niggas know that? I wonder how motherfuckers created the Speed Force. I want to ask that shit now. Because you never know. They probably thinking of some shit like that, but they just didn't know how to, they just didn't know this shit is what it actually was. Or they probably did know. Never know. But regardless, this is what this sounds like, bro. Sounds like straight powers. Just didn't know how to tell it correctly. Awesome fucking shit. All right, my bad. I gotta work on that. I know. This is an aspect of quantum mechanics which applies to the fact that any oscillating frequency, such as brainwave, of course they'll read these shits. All right. This is an aspect of quantum mechanics which applies to the fact that any oscillating frequency, such as a brainwave, reaches 2 points of complete rest, which constitute the boundaries of each individual oscillation, i.e., movement up or down. Without these points of rest, an oscillating wave pattern would be impossible since the points of rest are required to permit the energy to change direction and thus continue vibrating between rigid limits. But it is also true that when for an infinite infinitely infin, infinitesimally brief instant, we don't go with it. That energy reaches one of its 2 points of rest, it clicks out of time space and joins infinity. See Exhibit 3, next page. Hold up, we going to that. How big is this? Is this it? Exhibit 3. Um, oh, so this what they're saying for like a brief infinitely simile of a second. It blinks out of and goes in infinity and then comes back in. Clicked out portion. Energy travels intermediate dimensions. Distance. All right. So that's what this is what this was just describing. I again barely understand this. So it's clicking out here, but at this point is infinity, and then it peaks, and then goes back in, and then peaks. So I'll lead this up, so we can go back to 19. So this is what that was saying, right? The energy reaches one of its 2 points of rest, and it clicks out. All right, so we're gonna go. That critical step out of time space occurs when the speed of the oscillation, drops below 10 and to the negative 33rd power. So would that technically be 33 zeros and centimeters per second? Planck's distance. To use the words of Bentov, quantum mechanics tells us that when distances go below Planck's distance, which is 10 negative 33 centimeters, we enter in effect a new world. To return to our case in point, the human consciousness wave pattern reaches such high frequency that the pattern of clickouts comes so close together that there is virtual continuity in it. Then a portion of that consciousness is actually postulated to establish and maintain this information collection function in those dimensions located between time and space and the absolute. Thus, as the most continuous clickout pattern establishes itself, in continuous phase at speed below Planck's distance, but before reaching a state of total rest. Human consciousness passes through the looking glass of time-space after the fashion of Alice beginning her journey in a wonderland. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. What? Human consciousness passes through the looking glass of time after the fashion of Alice beginning her journey in a wonderland. All right. I'm still here. Wondering, he literally be using entire countries as lab rats. So, Gateway experience with its associated humusync technique is apparently designed, if used systematically and patiently, to enable human consciousness to establish a coherent pattern of perception in those dimensions where speeds below Planck's distance apply. This holds, this holds true irrespective of whether the individual is exercising his consciousness while in his physical body or whether he is doing so after having separated that consciousness from the physical body, i.e., the so called out of body state mentioned earlier. We can read another, we can read a few more. Number 20. Yeah, well, when you saying that it's gonna get tricky from here, he went lying. Fusing like a mud. Hey, if y'all can understand it, break it down. Like Mr. Tyson DeGrasse can break all that crap down. Hey, subatomic particles. The behavior of subatomic particles involves an interesting example of the phenomenon of clicking out discussed in the preceding paragraphs. It is a it is, in an article prepared for Science Digest magazine, Dr. John Glendon, Gleedman mentions the way to which subatomic particles communicate with each other once their energy fields become entrained as a result of colliding with each other. The communication concerned is, of course, postulated or occurring during the click out phase and oscillating. Oh, goodness. The communication concerned is, of course, postulated to be occurring during the click-out phase in the oscillation of the energy fields comprising the subatomic particles concerned. It is this cause which accounts for the cross communication at what in terms of time-space velocities would seem to involve speeds in excess of light. In reality, Einstein's theory of relativity is not being invalidated, but rather the communication concerned is taking place outside a dimension of time-space, to which the theory of relativity is strictly confined. Specifically, Dr. Gleedman tells us quantum theory postulates a kind of long-range Siamese twin effect whenever two subatomic particles collide and then go their different ways. Even when the particles are halfway across the universe from each other, it says they instantly respond to each other's actions. And in so doing, they violate relativity's ban on faster than light velocities. They violate relativity's ban on faster than light velocities. Indeed, regarding attempts to quantify what is known about the behavior of energy in dimensions apparent outside of time-space, Bentov speaks about courageous um, Sycophants, those guys, who are working on hypothetical particles called tachyons, which can move at higher speeds than light. The speed of tachyons starts just above the speed of light and ranges all the way to infinite velocities, or what we can comprehend. 21. Oh, oh, where's this page? Okay. 21. Dimensions in between. Now that we have postulated the legitimacy of assertion that the energy forms which compose consciousness can move beyond the time-space dimension, we need to turn our attention to the energy forms um, which inhabit those dimensions between time, space, and absolute. In doing so, we may better perceive the form that reality assumes when we encounter it in those intermediate dimensions. In this context, Bentov tells us the causal relationship between events break down, movements become jerky rather than smooth. Time and space may become grainy or chunky. Perhaps a piece of space can be traversed by particular matter in any direction without necessarily being synchronized with the piece of time. In short, a pair of events will occur in either time or space, the pair not being connected casually but by a random fluctuation. What Bentov means is that inside the dimension of time-space where both concepts apply in a generally uniform way, there is a proportional relationship between them. A certain space can be covered by energy moving in either particle or waveform in a certain time, assuming a specific velocity virtually anywhere in the time-space universe. So the relationship is neat and predictable. However, in the intermediate dimensions beyond time-space, the limitations imposed on energy to put it into a state of oscillating motion are not uniform as they are in our physical universe. Right? However, in the immediate dimensions beyond time space, the limitations imposed on energy to put into a state of oscillating motion are not uniform as they are in our physical. Oh, they don't go by the same rules. That's pretty much what that's saying. A myriad of various distortions and incongruities are thus likely to be encountered such that our nice, neat assumptions concerning the relationship between time and space as we know it in this dimension do not apply. But even more important, access is opened um, to both the past and the future when the dimension of current time space is left behind. Everything sounds so very confused. Everything is so very confused. All right, we're gonna be one more. 22, special status, out of body experience. Although human consciousness can, with enough practice, move beyond the dimension of time space and interface with other energy systems in other dimensions, the entire process is appreciably enhanced if that consciousness appreciably enhanced if that consciousness can be detached in a large measure from the physical body before such interface is attempted. What? Although human consciousness can move well, enough practice beyond dimension time space, interface which other energy systems and interface. entire process is appreciably enhanced if that consciousness can be detached in large measure from the physical body before such interface is attempted. Once an individual becomes proficient in the technique of out-of-body movement and then reaches the point where he is able to break out of the time-space while out of his body, he gains the advantage of clicking out part of his enhanced consciousness while starting from a base located much closer to the dimensions with which he wishes to communicate. Oh, I understand that. I understand that. Practice makes perfect. I mean, not perfect, but practice increases the skill. It's easy to do it, and he can move closer without getting screwed over. Or he can go into the absolute much easier. And he can pretty much, just sounds like set up checkpoints. He ain't got to start from level 1 if he's on level 5. If he can set up a checkpoint at level 4. That's what this sounds like. In other words, since I gotta just start reading through. In other words, since he is starting from a point which is higher up, to use an analogy from the time-space context, that part of his consciousness involved in clicking out will have a much more time to interact with dimensions beyond time-space because less time is required to traverse the intervening layers. Like a game, baby. Like a game. It's a save point. Moreover, once the individual is able to project his consciousness beyond time space, that consciousness would logically tend to entrain its frequency output with the new energy environment to which it is exposed, therein greatly enhancing the extent to which the individual's altered consciousness may be further modified to achieve a much heightened point of focus and a much refined oscillating pattern. As a result, a self-reinforcing process should ensue whereby the farther the consciousness in the out-of-body state can be projected beyond the time-space dimension, the more the level of energy output would be enhanced, thus promoting the potential for still further travel. The tentative conclusion to be drawn is that the out-of-body state may be regarded as an extremely effective way of accelerating the process of enhancing consciousness and of interfacing with dimensions beyond time-space. The practitioner of the gateway technique has a choice of concentrating on achieving and exploiting the out-of-body experience as opposed to concentrating his full efforts on expanding his consciousness exclusively from a physical base. The former would appear to promise much faster, more impressive success than does the latter. Also, you can set up the same way in the game, really, as far as training. Say if you reach level 5, you get somebody at level 4, you good. You get somebody level 3, you good. You get somebody level 2, you good. You get somebody level 1. That way, you always have some like a guide so that you can just slowly roll people in one by up the levels, educating them wise. Find a way to catch them. Say once they enter the absolute, right? We're going right because that's what this is pretty much, right? When you talking about breaking out of the time space, you're talking about the absolute infinity, right? Set up, bro. It sounds like a game. Checkpoints, training modules, bro. Bro, I mean, you can do that. That's probably what I. That's how I think about that. So you can communicate easily. Have whole classes on this joint, bro. Science, Nick, bro. All right, all right. We read quite a bit. You know what I'm saying? We hopping full into it. I thought your boy thought he was prepared. No, oh no, oh no. I just hit the top of the glacier. You know what I'm saying? The bottom of the sea is quite long. You know what I mean? But hey, mysterious. We're gonna come back and read some more later. Your boy's out. Nah, nah, nah.